Ashtotarshad Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Tisiddha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Antakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki I Gaur Premanande Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjani Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, please.
I just want to let you know that there's students here, right, for the first time? Is there a group of students here? Oh yeah, so we have a nice little group of students that just came for the first time.
Oh, thank you, wonderful, thank you. Welcome. Hare Krishna. So, thank you everyone for coming today. And I will speak on how the Bhagavad Gita harmonizes the two sides of our being, our emotion and our reason. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in the 8th chapter, 7th verse, Mai arpit mano buddhir mame vaishyasya asamshayah. Mai arpit. If you offer your mind and intelligence to me, you will live happily in this world and you will attain me. So we all have experienced sometimes this conflict within us. So I'll be using this as a whiteboard. You can see. On one side, reason is telling us this is what is the right thing to do. But emotion is pulling us in another direction. I know this is the right thing to do, but I don't feel like doing it. I strongly feel like doing this, but I know it's not good for me. So when reason and emotion pull us in different directions, we often become indecisive. We become half-hearted. And the worst situation is when not just in different directions, reason is pulling us in one direction or pointing in one direction, emotion is exactly the opposite direction. So at these times we just feel totally conflicted. We can even become paralyzed. And sometimes we easily understand it to be harmful. Say, somebody is just hooked to watching TV. Entertainment has been always a part of human society. But in the past, entertainment was a break from normal life. But nowadays, for many people, real life is a break from entertainment. Is keep watching movies, playing videos, or playing video games, and if I have to do some job, I have to do this errand, that just becomes a break. So they may even understand I'm wasting my time, but the emotions are too strong. So how do we deal with this? So at the start of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters. At the start of the Gita, Arjuna has a similar conflict. Reason told him that he had a duty to fight. On the opposite side were despotic people. There was King Duryodhan, who was a prince, he was virtually the king. He was so brazen that he had tried to dishonor and disrobe Arjuna's wife Draupadi in public. If such a person were given untrammeled power, the mind shudders to think what he would have done. So, reason told him that he should fight. That was his duty, that was the responsibility. But on that opposite side were also his loved ones. His family was there, His extended family, his dynasty was there. And among them were his venerable elders like his grandfather Bhishma. So emotion took him on the opposite side. And emotion told him, don't fight. And thus he was conflicted. He didn't know what to do. Pruchami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. What is the right thing to do? How can I do it? That is the question. So a conflicted Arjuna begins the Gita. And in that conflict, Arjuna puts aside his bow, saying, I can't fight. Visrujya sasharam chapam shoka samvigna manasaha. I can't do anything. I'm too conflicted. But by the end of the Gita, Arjuna's conflict is resolved. He has been able to get the inner conviction, the inner confidence, the inner energy to take up the challenge of responsibility. So Arjuna here is paralyzed. But by the end of the Gita, Arjuna is energized. He is rejuvenated. He is Karishye vachanam tava. I will do your will. So we will try to discuss today how Krishna leads Arjuna through this journey. And we'll talk about how emotion and reason work in our lives. So the Gita talks about broadly a 3-level model of the self. There is the physical body that we have, which is often called as the gross body. That is, when we see each other, this is the body that we see. So this body is male, female, this body is tall, short. Now beyond that, there is the subtle body. And beyond that is the soul, the Atma. Now these can be compared broadly to the hardware. If you have a phone, the hardware, software and user. So in modern science or modern society, the hardware has improved enormously. We have comforts and facilities and utilities that were unimaginable even for royalty. About 50 years ago, what to speak of 500 years ago. We have electricity, we have air transportation, we have internet. And yet, people are more distressed. We have depression, we have anxiety, we have addiction, we have self-destruction in the form of suicide. So, in one sense, the hardware is improving, but the software is worsening. So, why is this happening? And how can the Gita's model of the self help us address this? So, just elaborating on this model a little bit more. If we consider the soul, the Gita says this interface. So, we'll be focusing on this interface, that is the subtle body. So, here we could say that there are what links the subtle body to, this is broadly the subtle body. Within that, there is the ego. Ego is what causes us to misidentify with that which we are not. And apart from that, in the subtle body, there are two components. One is the intelligence and the other is the mind. So the intelligence is broadly associated with reason. And the mind is associated with emotion. So in common parlance, sometimes this is used as head and heart. But the idea is we have a rational faculty and we have an emotional faculty. And here in the verse which I started with, on which this class is with 8-7, Gita is telling that direct both the mind and the intelligence toward the divine. Mai arpita manobuddhir. So there can be a harmony of the intelligence and the mind. So for us, we as spiritual beings, we have both of these resources at our command. So if I put it another, the soul is here. And for the soul, the intelligence is one resource and the mind is another resource. And the soul can consult both of them. And then based on that, the soul makes a decision. So if somebody young person goes to a party, and that person drinks quite a bit. And there's one friend who says, hey, come on, let's drink a little more. It feels so good. Other person says, oh, it may feel good right now, but tomorrow morning it will feel terrible. Better don't drink. You have to drive back now. So this person is undecided. Okay, should I listen to this one or this one? It feels so good, but hey, the effect won't be so good. So like that is our situation. Inside us, the soul is there, or we are at our core the soul, and the mind says one thing, the intelligence says another thing. And we are torn. The mind is driven by emotion, the intelligence operates based on reason. Now, one important point is that it is not that emotion itself is bad. And it is not the mind itself is bad. The Gita says the mind can be both our enemy and our friend. So the emotion can sometimes sabotage us. But that does not make emotion itself a bad thing. I'll explain that quickly. But the point is, so we will try to look at this relationship between intelligence and mind in 4 broad possibilities. And that will be the 4 parts of the class that I'll discuss. If we consider 4 quadrants, his intelligence is strong on this side, intelligence is weak on the other side. And the mind is strong on one side, the mind is weak on the other side. So we can consider different human beings in these different categories. So let's start with the left bottom, where the intelligence is weak and the mind is also weak. So when the intelligence is weak, that person can't think properly, can't reason, can't analyze. And that person also their mind is not very strong. That means they don't have strong desire, they don't have strong emotions. So they don't do much. Generally, we are driven by our desires and emotions. It's only when a person feels strongly about something, they act. I want this, or I want to fix this. So if that person, if their intelligence is weak, so they are, we can say, to put it politely, foolish. But because their mind is weak, by mind is weak means they don't have any strong desires, they don't have any strong emotions. So largely they are harmless. They don't do much. People just loaf around, maybe watch some TV, eat some food. They just become, they sit on couch, they sit like a couch potato and then they become like a potato. Say they don't do much. They are actually not living life in reality, you can say. Some people just sit in front of a TV and just keep eating. Okay, we can say they are harming their body, but they're not out being destructive. So what happens is, if the mind is weak, intelligence is weak, we can't figure out what is of value. And what feels good, it also based very much on the moment. So generally when people want to binge watch movies, they need something to eat, popcorn or something like that. Why? Because when you're watching a movie, everything is imaginary. All the pleasure of watching the movie is imaginary. Maybe a heroine hugging, and people are thinking, if I am there, it would be so nice. That imagination is there, everything is imaginary, something has to be real. So the food is real. So I keep eating the food. So in the language of the Bhagavad Gita, this is tamo guna, the mode of ignorance. Krishna says that, ya swapnam bhayam shokam vishadamevacha na vimunchati durmedha dhutisa partha tamasi. He says that this is characterized by utter delusion. It is characterized by lethargy. So this is a state where a human being is not doing anything. They're harming themselves, but not in a major way, and they're just ineffectual. But let's take the other possibility now. So this is not a very productive way to live. So you could put it that we don't want to live this way. Then we could have the second possibility is that the mind is strong but the intelligence is weak. Now these are, you could say, they are also foolish, but they are harmful. These people have, because the intelligence is not very strong, their reasoning faculty is not very good. But their mind is very strong. So their desires are strong, their feelings are strong. And then they're driven by those. So to put it, if we consider this, put it visually here, in this person, their intelligence is very weak. Their mind is also very weak. So even if it is pointing one way, the other way, it just doesn't matter. They're not going to do much. But in this case, if we consider, their mind is extremely strong and their intelligence is fairly weak. It's a small force. And such people can cause a lot of harm. Harm to themselves, harm to others. So at a very simple level, a person might have a car and they have the urge to drive extremely fast. The speed gives some thrill, but speed can thrill and speed can also kill, isn't it? But their reasoning is not very strong. Once a person was driving extremely fast. A cop pulled him over. Didn't you see the speed limit? He said, I saw the speed limit, I just didn't see you. So the idea is that they don't think the speed limit is for their protection. They think, their idea of cleverness is, if I can just get away by doing whatever I want to do, then there's no problem. So even if show such people, you show them some people who is met with a terrible accident, say, okay, yeah, these things happen. But that's rare. It won't happen to me. It won't happen to me. The consequences of their actions, that just doesn't register within them. And in this situation, the mind being strong, the intelligence being weak, it can be harmful individually, it can also be harmful socially. Especially in today's world, this is an extremely dangerous thing. A prominent psychologist, Carl Jung, a few centuries ago, he said that the more outer power we get, the more inner power we need. The more outer power we get, we need inner power to be able to use that outer power. It's like, we all get angry. And anger can be a very strong emotion. But all of us have some boundaries to our anger. We may get angry, but what can we do? We may yell at someone. If we are really angry, we might speak some swear words. We might throw some objects, maybe throw some punches. But imagine if the head of state of a country that has nuclear weapons gets angry. That person can nuke an entire country. So the mind is strong, the intelligence is weak. That can be disastrous. The amount of harm the person can cause is huge. And Krishna talks about, so this is one characteristic of Rajoguna, the mode of passion. Krishna says, Etam drishtim avashtabhya nashtatmano alpa buddhaya. A such person can destroy themselves, a person can destroy others. So this is also a dangerous situation to be in. We have very strong emotions, but not a very strong intelligence. Now normally, we all go, this is not necessarily a bad situation to be in. This is the situation through which we all go. As children, as newborn babies, they don't have much reasoning faculty. Just feel. Oh, this feels good, that feels bad. And generally when anything feels bad, they cry. They cry. And that's understandable. But the fact is that as a person grows up, one of the things that needs to be done is that you could say small children are just largely mind and very little intelligence. But it is one of the primary responsibilities of parents to actually train the intelligence of the child. That's why If we can, so normally speaking, everybody will go through this phase. But we need to go through this and we need to grow through this. So for example, there's a small child. That child likes some food. Okay, I took this food, I want more of the food. I'll take more of the food. Just grab it. But suppose that there are two children and a child is eating food from their plate, maybe their food gets over, they have got some pancakes, it gets over, and a child immediately takes food from the sibling's plate. Now, the parents have to say, no, you want more food, I'll give it to you. But don't take from anyone else's plate. So basically, it is the parents' responsibility to set boundaries. So broadly speaking, the intelligence values boundaries. Every action requires boundaries. Now we may say, what's the big deal? The child takes food from the sibling's plate, no big deal. Okay, but we may say it's not a big deal because sibling doesn't mind, the family doesn't mind. But the problem is, imagine the child grows up and has a job and he goes to a corporate dinner. And while eating from the corporate dinner, suddenly the person starts taking from next person's plate. That would be ridiculous, isn't it? So the boundaries need to be learned, and that's why for a child to grow up, or rather for a child to actually grow up, for parents to responsibly help the child grow up, one of the most important words that parents need to speak to a child is no. That may seem very unloving, but no is not deprivation. No is setting up boundaries. Now, of course, you can explain why no is being said, but the mind tends to devalue boundaries. If at all it values them, it doesn't value them much. It devalues boundaries. And if the mind is strong and the intelligence is weak, then a person doesn't care for boundaries. And that's what becomes harmful. So the normal process of growth is, so we can say, if we can say normal biological growth, if this is childhood, and then comes adulthood. So one process of adulthood, in childhood, the mind will be much stronger than the intelligence. That's just natural. But as the person starts growing, what should happen is, the mind may still be strong, but the intelligence, it should not be way too strong. And as a person actually matures, the intelligence should become stronger than the mind. And that is when a person can take up responsibility. If a person, their mind does not become very strong, then, if their intelligence is not strong enough, today they get a job and they say, one day they feel, oh, this is the best job in the world. And the next day, why did I even take this job? This is terrible. And the mind tends to be very fickle because it is largely driven by emotion. It is like a sine wave. It goes from like to dislike. Or to use some teenagerish language, I love it, to I hate it. It just goes to the opposite emotions. So the mind is very much driven by emotions. And as a biological stage, it is understandable. We go through those emotions, especially in teenage. The hormones are rising in the body. There are metabological changes happening. So the mind is strong and the intelligence has not yet caught pace over there. It's a tough spot to be in. But the problem is, while biologically everyone grows up, many people internally don't grow up at all. So then, if they don't grow up, when we say grow up here, what it means? That their intelligence goes stronger enough to manage their mind. So, okay, somebody says, oh, I like this job, I don't like this job. Okay, but it's a job, I need to have a living, so I'll do the job, whether I like it or not. So that's responsibility. So in one sense, we could define responsibility as placing intention above emotion. Or rather, again, intention comes from the intelligence. So intelligence above mind, reason above emotion. If a person cannot do that, they cannot actually be responsible. Now this if this mind is very fickle, then the problem is that the mind does not value any boundaries at all. For the mind, nothing is sacred. If something feels good, great. If it feels bad, just give it up. So we can do this with jobs, we can do it with possessions. These people can do it with relations. I like you, let's be together. I don't like you, just break up, get lost. Nowadays, when people break up, there's this whole phenomenon of ghosting. That means today you are the most important person in my life, and tomorrow I act as if you don't exist only. So it's like this going on the emotions of the mind. It's going wild up and down. And when this happens, there can be no stability in life. So a lot of insecurity. So this is also, if you go back to this is also an unhealthy state to be in. So normally we should be able to grow up. But if we don't grow up in the sense that our intelligence doesn't become stronger than the mind, then we are in for a lot of trouble. Trouble for ourselves and trouble for others. In America, we often hear these tragic cases of young people just going to schools and shooting others. It's horrifying to hear those. There can be many causes of this. But one of the common denominators that has been found is those kids who become teenagers or adults who do it, they often came from broken families, negligent parents or abusive parents. Now, this does not mean that these people are not responsible. It is their choice to do that action. But if a person doesn't learn boundaries in childhood, as they are growing up, then I get angry, I hate, I can destroy anyone. That's why in today's world, we are in a very dangerous situation. Technology has increased our outer power. Anybody can acquire in some countries like America, anybody can get a gun very easily. But even if we can't get a gun, and nowadays we have social media, we may not assassinate people, but we can character assassinate people. We can just spread one rumor about someone, and then that rumor can spread everywhere. We can destroy a person's reputation, we can destroy people, and that happens sometimes. There's online trolling and it can be very damaging to people. So the more outer power we have, the more inner power we need. And inner power in this context means that we need to be able to restrain our mind. So this is unhealthy. But some people feel, therefore the solution is that this is a desirable state. That we should have a weak mind and we should have a strong intelligence. However, it's not that simple. This is largely the idea of weakening our mind and strengthening our intelligence. That means don't have any strong emotions, don't have any strong desires. Just act solely based on reason. This may seem, especially if we have experienced the problems with the too strong emotions, too strong mind, we may think this is desirable. But actually this can make us very impersonal. And this idea of having no desires, just operating solely based on reason, that is the driving idea of impersonalism as a philosophy. So impersonalism means that don't feel anything, don't desire anything. So the idea is that ultimately all emotions, they are the cause of illusion. All desires, they drive us to bondage. Therefore the solution is give up desires, give up emotions. Just stay steady, just stay steady. Well, if we are very much misled by our emotions and desires, becoming steady can be a good thing. But if we have no emotions and no desires, then essentially we become like robots. Nowadays, ChatGPT has created both sensation and alarm. You just give some sentence and it can make a poetry out of it. It can write an essay out of it. Now, maybe in future ChatGPT might be able to write beautiful poetry also. But it can't experience the beauty of poetry. For it, it is just rearranging words based on some algorithms. It can do it at astonishingly huge speed. But there is no experience at all. If there are no emotions, then what is the point of living? Emotions are like the ornaments of life. They're the spices of the meal of life. We long to have emotions. A state where there is no emotions. How can we have relationships if there are no emotions? How can we have any fulfillment in life? So the idea of weakening our mind and strengthening our intelligence alone, it might seem initially appealing, and here we could say that here a person might be wise because their intelligence is strong, but they are wise and passive completely. Generally, if we think of harmful emotions, we may think of anger as a harmful emotion. We want to control our anger, we want to get rid of anger. But it's not that simple. Suppose a bully is terrorizing some small child, and say we are a parent passing by, and we see that bully, and if we don't feel anything, then if we don't feel that something is wrong out there, then something is wrong in here. Isn't it? Where is our humanity? There are things that are wrong in the world, and if we don't feel any emotional response to that, then we are losing an essential part of our humanity. So we need to feel emotions. But what we don't want is, we don't want to be controlled by emotions alone. Emotions are a part of the essential human experience. But the problem comes when, so that's why this is certainly, we could say, better than the previous one. That this is better than having a weak mind and weak intelligence, or a weak mind and strong intelligence. But still, such a person will become very inert. Okay, whatever is happening, let it happen. Life goes on. Why bother to do anything at all? No desires, no emotions. And one thing is, from here, it is very easy to slide down to here. Because if we don't have anything worthwhile to live for in life, then just having reasoning, okay, this is the right thing to do, I'll do it. This is the right thing to do, I'll do it. This is the right thing I'll do. But if you're not experiencing anything, how long can you just keep continuing doing the right thing if you're not experiencing any joy, any fulfillment? Will gravitate towards, the intelligence will not be able to hold itself up for very long. So Srila Prabhupada would often say that even if impersonalists rise towards a very high level where they seem to be liberated, their emotions, their desires, they drag them down. So this is not the optimal situation to be in. The optimal situation is where we are wise and we are energetic. So wise, then when we are wise, then we are act constructively. And if we have energy, so the wisdom comes from the fact that the intelligence is strong, and the energy comes from the fact that the mind is strong. Mind is strong means we feel emotions. Hey, this is good, I want to pursue it. This is bad, I want to fix this. Okay. So, wise and energetic, both of them together. That is how we would like to be. And this is what Bhakti Yoga actually does. This is what is the recommendation of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Now some people think that Bhakti Yoga is only emotion and no reason. No, it is not like that. Bhakti Yoga does involve reasoning. But it is not only reasoning. Because the reasoning faculty is guiding us, therefore our emotions, we know when to regulate our emotions, and we know when to direct our emotions. So one way to understand this is that if we consider what is the Gita's message, Mai Arpita Mano Buddhir. So with the reasoning faculty, which comes from the intelligence, we can discern what is temporary and what is eternal. So we differentiate between what is short term, what is long term. And ultimate long term is that which lasts forever. We can differentiate between that. And then with the intelligence, when the emotion is directed towards something temporary, something short term, then we restrain it. We create a barrier around it. No, I don't want to get involved in this. I don't want to get attached to this. But when the emotion is directed towards something enduring, something lasting, something long term, something eternal, then the reason creates a barrier. It creates a boundary to protect us. But when emotion is directed towards something healthy, then reason in one sense redoubles the emotion. Yes, this is a good thing. Desire it more, seek it more. And thus reason and emotion can both work together. Now, what Bhakti wisdom has given in the Bhagavad Gita tells us is that we have not been given desires so that God is not like a sadist who first gives us desires and then tells us, don't seek desirable things. Control your desires. It is not a perverse thing. Once a person asked me when I was in Australia that, if God wanted us to do good things, then why are the good choices so few and the bad choices so many? So I said, that's how it always is in any multiple choice exam. So, it is not that the teacher who is setting the multiple choice exam wants the student to fail. It's not because of that the teacher has given so many wrong options. But the point is, the teacher does not want the student to succeed merely by guesswork. The teacher wants to check whether the student has actually studied the subject or not. So similarly, we have desirable objects and we have desires. So this is not given by God to torment us. Oh, don't desire that which is desirable. Not like that. But the idea is, God has also given us buddhi, intelligence. And if we are using our intelligence, then we will be able to choose wisely what is desirable. In the Vishnu Sahasranam, which is describing 1,000 names of Vishnu, there are many different names. There is Kamada, Kamaha, Kamyo. Kamada is one who is the giver of desires. He is the giver of desires, he is the giver of desirables. If we want something very strongly, we can pray to him and he will give it to us. It's Kamada. So Kamada means one who gives desires. But then he is also Kamaha. Kamada means is a giver of desires and desirables. Desires come from him, desirables come from him. And he can give us if we want. But Kamaha means that he is a destroyer of desires. So why will he give us desires and then why will he destroy desires? What he means is that actually he can destroy unhealthy desires. We may know that earlier I talked about this emotion, reason, tension. Sometimes we know something is good, but something is bad, but still the desire is very strongly pulling us in that direction. So reason may be inadequate. I try to reason, I won't do this, but reason is inadequate. At that time, if we turn to Krishna with devotion, so by Krishna's mercy, if we are in a situation where this is the power of emotion, it's going in an unhealthy direction, and our reason is not strong enough. This is emotion, this is reason. So because the power of emotion is very strong, we may not be able to overpower it, restrain it. So we can try to increase the power of reason. So by studying scriptures, by associating with wise people, we can increase the power of reason. But it is Krishna who through the process of bhakti can do something miraculous. What he does is, rather than thinking of desires and emotions as always bad, Krishna transforms our desires. So what will happen by the process of bhakti, if somebody practices, say, bhakti yoga, if they practice bhakti yoga, then the result of that will be that person, if say this is the healthy direction, this is the unhealthy direction. So by the practice of bhakti yoga, the unhealthy desires will become weaker and the healthy desires will become stronger. Eventually, the power of emotion will not only complement the power of reason, but actually emotion will lead us in the healthy direction. And that is the stage where the inner war ends. The inner war between what is good and what feels good. That is there, and that dissipates so much of our energy. But when what is good and what feels good both become similar, then life becomes so much easier. I'll conclude with this point now, that if we consider these two circles, there are things that feel good and there are things that are good. So we could have food that is tasty, it feels good, and we have food that is healthy. Now, if these two circles were overlapping, life would be so easy. See, all the tasty food, if it were healthy, life would be so easy. But that does not mean that these two circles are completely non-intersecting. They do intersect. So we start from here. We start in that area where desire and emotion intersect, reason and emotion intersect for us. And we start connecting with Krishna through that. We practice bhakti yoga. If we like kirtan, we like music in general. Now there could be many different kinds of music. There could be music which fuels people towards violence, which fuels people towards sensuality. But we can have few music which uplifts our hearts, which fills us with devotion. So we choose that music. We focus on that music. And gradually by that, we will find peace within it. We'll find shelter within it. We'll find power within it. By that, our desires will become transmuted. And our mind and intelligence will start working together. That is the state of inner empowerment. We all have achieved some things in life, but we all have often been conflicted. So in spite of our mind and intelligence pulling us in opposite directions, we all have achieved something significant in our lives, whatever it may be. We are educated, we have jobs, we are doing some things in life. But just imagine if the energy that goes in this inner conflict is overcome. If that energy is released, there's no longer inner conflict. Each one of us can do so many more better things. And not only so many better things we can do, we can also become so much better beings. And that is the promise of the Bhagavad Gita. When we practice bhakti yoga, when we direct our heart's emotion towards the Lord, we nourish both emotion and reason in a mood of service to Krishna. So then it may be our job, it may be our family. We do it all in a mood of service to Krishna. We direct our reason and emotion. That way, then we get extraordinary empowerment. We can surprise ourselves with how many good things we can do and how much good beings we can become. And that is what happens to Arjuna at the end of the Gita when he is empowered by the message of the Bhagavad Gita. His intelligence is with him and his mind is also with him. He understands, and although this war is going to be fought, I can't stop it. But my opponents are also spiritual beings. Bhishma is a virtuous, devoted soul. So although I may have to fight him, although my arrows may pierce his body, but his soul will be elevated, his soul will be liberated. And right now I may think that the arrows are causing him pain, will cause him pain. But right now he is already in a painful situation. Although he is a virtuous person, he has to fight on the wrong side. And not only fight on the wrong side, while fighting on the wrong side, he has to hear the constant taunts of Duryodhan, who is so ungrateful. He feels, you are not fighting wholeheartedly. He says, Krishna is the greatest well-wisher of everyone. And Krishna has better plans for Arjuna than what Arjuna has for himself. Krishna has better plans for each one of us than what we have for ourselves. So if we direct our reason and our emotion in a mood of service to Krishna, Krishna can take us to a far better place than what we can even imagine. That is the empowerment of devotion to Krishna and the harmonization of reason and emotion therein. So I'll summarize. I discussed broadly 4 points. I started by talking about the reason-emotion conflict that is there and how it can undermine or even sabotage us. And then we discussed in that connection, the Gita's model of the self, where we talked about the subtle body as the link between the soul and the gross body. And within that, we have the intelligence which is associated with the emotion and the mind which is associated with the reason. Then I discussed how there are these 4 quadrants, that intelligence weak, intelligence strong, and then mind strong, mind weak. And we discuss how in the lowest quadrant, mind strong and mind weak. So if the intelligence is weak and the mind is also weak, then the problem is that the person becomes passive. They are harmless and they are passive. So this is undesirable. Here the person can be very destructive, and we all can be in this center because technology has given us a lot of outer power, and outer power without inner power is a recipe for disaster. So normally children are born in this stage, but it is the responsibility of parents and society to take them to the next stage. Now here it's okay, it's definitely better than the previous stages, but our emotions and our desires are an essential part of who we are. We don't want to suppress them. This is the stage where there is, we can say, maximum effectiveness, maximum empowerment. And this is where Bhakti Yoga takes us. And we all can, by the practice of Bhakti, find the harmony of reason and emotion and thereby become the best that we can be and do the best that we are meant to do. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Does anyone have? Yes, please.
I know you talked about intelligence and mind, but ego was kind of left on the side. Okay. I know intelligence and mind were beautifully harmonized, Prabhu, in your nice lecture.
So ego, see, ultimately, where is the ego over there? So ego is the sense of I am. And ego is always going to be there. But the problem is the false ego. False ego means to identify with that which we are not. So by the false ego, we may identify with our mind too strongly, we may identify with our intelligence too strongly, and we may identify with the extensions associated with that. So basically, ego is what creates the layer of misidentification. And that's what we ultimately want to understand. I am neither the mind, I am not the intelligence. I am the soul, and I have both of these as resources which I can use for functioning in life.
Okay.
Then we are student the true ego. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the wonderful class, Charan Prabhu. Very quickly, could you go through examples from Shastra for each of those 4 quadrants and what the consequences was for acting in that sort of level of intelligence and mind? If it's possible within like a few minutes to answer that question.
I think it's difficult. Generally, Tamoguna, the scriptures don't have much examples. We can have Kumbhakarna. Nobody stays forever in quadrant 4. He was just sleeping and lethargic. So that is an example of that. A strong in mind and weak intelligence, all the demoniac characters are examples of that. Ravan could be an example of that. Then a strong intelligence, weak mind. Generally, impersonalists are examples of that. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita we have Sarvamata Prakashanasakti especially. But when the beauty of Krishna, the beauty of Mahaprabhu is revealed to them, and they become completely attracted and energized. And then Arjuna himself, Hanuman is an example. Hanuman becomes angry when Lord Ram is derided, mocked by Ravana. And then he uses that anger to send a very strong message to Ravana. Well, Hanuman burnt Lanka out of anger, but it was also at one level what you can call as the power of warning. He gave a warning to him. This is, it's actually the geopolitical word for this is deterrence. That you don't mess with me, I'll show you my power. So the point was he was using his emotion but guided by reason. So devotees who work in a very empowered way, they are examples in the fourth quadrant. Okay, thank you. Any last question? Okay.
Thank you for coming today. Are you going to be doing any more classes here?
Okay. Yeah, Tuesday morning I'm speaking in the temple. Today evening I'm going now to Laguna Beach. We have another center 1 hour away. So we are having a class over there.
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning here in the temple. Thank you. Yes, Prabhu. Last question. Stop with this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prabhu. Prabhupada used that 4-quadrant example, but he had lazy intelligent. You remember that? There was lazy intelligent as being the most desirable. Lazy intelligent, then there was active intelligent, lazy unintelligent, lazy. You familiar with that? Active, unintelligent, and so Prabhupada did something like that, but he had
well, my understanding of lazy intelligence, so I thought of this, that lazy intelligence and active intelligence, that is basically a slightly different paradigm. It is the lazy intelligent are the Brahmanas. The active intelligent are the Kshatriyas. So that means the Brahmanas, they don't themselves go around and do things. They educate those who will do things. But even the Brahmanas, they may be, the word lazy has a negative connotation. What it means is that they are not running around and doing things. But the Brahmanas also feel strongly. That the result of the Brahmanas have a weak mind and they don't feel any emotions. They do feel strong emotions. They feel emotions directed to, say for example, when in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Suta Goswami describes about how somebody was torturing a cow and a bull. Immediately the Brahmanas are dismayed and they said, only if this is connected with Krishna, speak about it. Otherwise speak some other subject. So they do have emotions. So I don't think that 4-quadrant analysis is a nice analysis, but I don't think exactly fits in this.
Okay, it's a different paradigm.
Yeah, it's a different paradigm. Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. So, just a quick announcement. Much of what I spoke today about the mind and intelligence, that is there in my latest book. This is You Are Not Your Mind, You Are Better. There are 64 reflections based on the Bhagavad Gita for managing our mind. And they are all illustrated with some simple diagrams like I was drawing in the class. And apart from that, I have few other books. We have a book on Ramayana, which illustrates these themes of inner management through the relationships and the stories in the Mahabharata, Ramayana. And there's a book on reincarnation, which gives a rational basis for rational evidence for the soul surviving from one life to another through stories of past life memories. It also answers questions about ghosts. If we are all eternal, why do we forget our past lives? If the soul is eternal, why is population increasing? What determines the past life? Questions like that are answered. And then lastly, there is a set calendar with 365 quotes, which are inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. So this is a very accessible way to share spiritual wisdom with friends and colleagues who may not be otherwise interested in spirituality. So each quote is inspired by one verse of the Bhagavad Gita. So like I talked about valuing, devaluing. Our mind overvalues those who devalue us. And that's how we stay forever dissatisfied. So don't overvalue those who devalue you and learn to value those who value you. There are quotes like that which are inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. Even if we fare well in life, we have to say farewell to life. So all these are available. If you want, I am available for signing the books also. If you have any questions, I am also there for a few minutes. Thank you. Hare Krishna.